This is the Wise Guy Radio Show, a podcast dedicated to educating and inspiring through conversations with today's top talents in the world of glass. We will be dissecting their journeys in hopes to deliver actionable content that you, the artist, can start implementing now, helping you grow not only as a creative spirit, but also a successful artistic entrepreneur. With a little organization, relationship building, and your artistic ability, you can obtain greatness. Climb aboard, whether an artist, retail owner, or enthusiast. We have a ton of fun in store for you. Welcome to the Wise Guy Radio Show.
You're listening to the Wise Guy Radio Show.
This episode of the Wise Guy Radio Show is brought to you by Mountain Glass Arts. For the month of March 2018, Mountain Glass is offering their Boro sale, Chinese color and clear, rod and tube at 40% off. No coupon code necessary. They just have the sale already up there. And for all you beautiful soft glass nerds, they have their Creations is Messy sale. Rod is 40% off right now. Just put in the coupon code MESSY. That's MESSY. And they also have some kiln sales going on right now. They have their Scarab Glassmaster 33. It's a 27 by 16 by 12 240 volt kiln. They have a really good sale right now. They got it. Actually, it's $1,000 off right now. Holy shit! Normally these things are $3,800 and $3,875. Right now they're on sale for $2,899. And they also have their Genkin chili pepper kiln, which is a killer kiln. It's a great traveling. It weighs about 6 pounds. It was actually made out of a toolbox, which is genius. But this thing right now is normally regularly priced as $775. They have it on sale for $619. And the size is a 16 by 6 by 4.5, and it's a perfect tabletop kiln. It's great for traveling, for demonstrations. I mean, you can't make like super big stuff at all, but it's a great kiln. I love this thing. I've been using one for years. They have their Bethlehem Alpha Burner right now on sale for $187, as well as their multi-mix hand torch that Nortel makes. Normally they're $343, and right now it's on sale for $274. They also have a ton of new colors coming in. Just companies, there's just all kind of stuff coming out right now in this industry. It's amazing how much is going on in this glass world. So for any other questions, comments, and concerns, just go to mountainglass.com. That is mountainglass.com. Hey, what's happening? Welcome to the Wise Guy Radio Show, episode number 187. This is your host, Jason Michael, and thank you so much for tuning in today. And we are finally back on track here. Sorry for the delay on the shows last month, and the month before that has just been crazy. January was a month of sickness, and then February, just scheduling conflicts. I had a whole bunch of people I had to move up from January because of not being able to record from being sick almost the entire month. And then the crazy trade show stuff happened in February with Glass Vegas, and then Champs, and also Age. All within about 3 weeks of each other, so everybody's booked for that. And so anyways, we got back on track here. We got interviews lined back up. And today is with Eric Goldschmidt. Eric's been a glass artist for around 22 years, I believe he said. He currently is employed and works as an educator and instructor over in Corning. And we get into a lot of conversation and talk about his early beginnings, the medium itself of glass, and just the movement of glass itself through the centuries. But he also shares his story and his journey of what he's doing at Corning. I'm not sure if those are aware, but they, at one point in time, I think they've actually, contracts have been changed to a new studio, but they were demonstrating hot shop glass blowing furnace work on top of the Celebrity cruise lines. I think he said there was 4 cruise lines that were doing it with Celebrity, which is fascinating. So we get in that conversation, and also about his journeys and travels around the world. And then, of course, our fun little quick fire crash in a kiln round at the end of the show, too. So I definitely hope you enjoy this episode. It was a lot of fun. And, so that being said, there's a whole ton of shit been going on. I was taking notes and writing stuff down. I'm like, God, I could do a whole episode on all the things that have been going on the last couple months. But I'm not going to bore you with all those details. One fun, exciting thing I do want to share, though, for those that may not be following me on social media, a couple weeks back, I had a meeting with the owners of the company, Arribas Brothers, who I work for. And as we're going through a new growth spurt and changes in the company, we're also changing up some concepts and ideas and stuff we're making. And I always talk about on here, and just in life in general, how it never hurts to ask questions. even if you're told no, who gives a shit? Ask questions. Like every no is one no closer to a yes. That whole philosophy. And towards the end of my meeting, we had, they asked me if I had anything else to ask about or whatever, as things were going really well. And I kept thinking to myself, like, I know there's something I want to ask. It was just one of those things. I didn't write it down. And then it just like popped in my head. And I said, what about Marvel and Star Wars? And it's two different companies within Disney that we haven't had a chance to explore yet in glass, just due to the licensing rights. And with us even being a third party, we can't just make anything we want towards those brands. We have to actually have permission from them, get licensing before we can even start the process of developing characters and stuff in glass, product lines, etc. But I asked about Marvel and Disney, or Marvel and Star Wars, and the owner of our company and our art director both immediately had smiles on their faces. They didn't say a word, and they looked at each other. She got up and went and got some samples and came back with a little 3D print of Baby Groot. And as we were going through my conversation about my upcoming items and series that I'm working on, my plate is full. And I looked over at them and I said, I'll do Baby Groot, and I'll take this one particular thing off my list. And they were excited about the idea of me being interested in doing this. And it's still surreal right now. It's been about 2 weeks since this happened. But it is officially our very first Marvel character that we're making in-house for us. But as far as I know, also I will be the very first person in the history of comic books to legally create a work of character work in glass for Marvel. Even though it's not for Marvel per se, it still is in a sense because of where we are and where we're associated. So it's a huge milestone for our company, but also just in the comic book industry in general. And I'm like over the moon excited still to the 2 weeks later about this whole situation. I went through, made a clear sketch for my first concept piece. And then right now it's all about developing the color and figuring out the what I'm going to be using. And I've been sharing my process and what has been going on with that on my Instagram. And if you're not following me on my Instagram yet, my Instagram is @jmichaelglass. It's all one word, JMICHAELGLASS. And I'm just kind of sharing my journey on this new developing character with Baby Groot. And ideally, if I can nail this guy, it's going to open up a door for the company to then bring in, and all of us doing something kind of Marvel. We have some other product lines coming in too, stuff I can't discuss as to confidentiality, but I can share this and this part of what I'm doing. And it's super exciting. And again, it just goes down back to what I was saying about not being afraid to ask questions, even if you're told no. Sometimes you have to ask that same question 4 or 5 times over a year or 5 years or 10 years, but eventually you're going to get the answer yes. I'm almost positive. And, it even goes with my gig that I have now. It took, after a conversation, 5 years later, I finally got a phone call saying that they had an opening, and, I jumped through that door as fast as I could. So the glass itself teaches us patience. It teaches us determination and focus, just to constantly strive to pursue whatever it is you're pursuing in the glass. And for myself, the childhood dreams I had was to be an artist for Disney, and now I'm doing my glass art there. And my entire life I've been reading and drawing comic book characters, and I feel like my entire life I have been studying and practicing to get to where I am right now with this Baby Groot. Even though I've been making Olaf and a bunch of other characters and other things for the company, as well as the 19 years almost now of glass I've been making, really feels like it's all culminated to this one specific thing now where I'm making my first comic character in glass. It's just, again, it's surreal and exciting and fun, and I want to share it because, again, I want to help inspire you guys and gals, but I also just want you to understand that you just got to be persistent. If there's something that you feel in your heart and soul that you want to do, there's no reason why you can't do it. Just got to find a way to get there. I mean, hell, who would have thought that there have been glass-blowing studios on top of cruise ships? It's pretty damn fascinating. And again, Eric gets into that talk about that and that whole thing and his experience of doing the hot shop work and on top of a cruise ship. It's just so neat. Pardon my throat clearing here. It's kind of early in the morning still. But anyways, I'm going to stop rambling here. Again, there's a ton of things to discuss and talk about. The next episode, I'm going to do a solo show, talk about some current events in the industry, trade shows. I got in touch with the folks over at Glass Vegas. We're going to bring them on too, just talk about the current industry, trade show scene, just a lot of stuff, other artists coming on. Just super excited where things are back on track finally. And it feels good to do this interview. I haven't talked to another person like this in a couple months. So stay tuned for more interviews, more talks, more chat about glass and life and business and all the things that are going on in our community out there in the world of glass. So until next time, definitely enjoy this episode with Eric. If you guys have not yet subscribed to our show, if you have an iPhone, on iTunes. We're also available on iHeartRadio, Stitcher, through the Droid systems, Google Play, you name it, we are on there. The website has had a little weird glitches here and there, but we are on the interwebs. You can go to wiseguymedia.com. On the front page there is a updated link for the current episodes, as well as you can go to the Wise Guy Radio tab on the website, and that'll take you to all the episodes there as well. Getting all the artist pages built and all that kind of stuff, and we'll have every episode will have its own page, basically, that'll have a little profile. I have tons and tons of pictures and biographies that I have sent and have received over the last 4 years of doing this that we're going to be getting up here soon. So things are moving forward, and so I'm rambling. I'm getting the fuck out of here. So again, you guys enjoyed the day. Happy melting, and enjoy this interview with Eric Goldschmidt, and we'll talk to you soon. Love you so much. Take care. Bye-bye. Hey, what's up, Eric? Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jason. It's great to be here.
Yeah, man. Pumped to have you on, brother. I've been following your work for well over a decade now. I mean, literally. So it's an honor to have you on here and seeing you in Torch Talk and helping out all the newbies and those that talk shit and all the trolls on there. Everything else that goes on.
It's a pleasure to help out, and when I see some information I feel like I can help with, I'm certainly happy to jump in and share some resources.
Yeah,
so
yeah, absolutely.
Try to keep the information flowing correctly out there.
Yeah, we appreciate that for sure because it's needed.
Mm-hmm.
lots of misinformation per se.
Yeah, it can be dangerous.
Yeah, exactly. So before I get too off topic here, man, if you want to get us started here by telling us your superhero origin story and how you were introduced to the flame.
My superhero origin story. Well, before I got into glass, I was a candle maker. And had spent a few years building up a wholesale candle company with a couple of friends, living in Vermont at the time. And I had a friend of mine, John Schoof, who had just been out in Oregon learning from Chris Shave for about a year. He moved back to Vermont, needed a place to stay. He moved in with me, set up a glass studio in our garage. And I saw this new process with new material, new possibilities of what could be done, and I just couldn't resist giving the glass a shot. And within about a month of playing with glass the first time, I had quit the candle thing and realized that that glass was going to be my thing. I just got completely consumed within really the first month, and that was 22 years ago, so
Sure.
I guess I found my thing.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah.
What were some of the stuff those guys were working on?
John Schoof was my original instructor. He was a pipe maker.
Cool.
And he got me started making marbles to add on to his stuff. He got me started pulling points, doing some of his basic pattern work, just wrap and rake sort of stuff. And so that got me started and made me enough money that I could come out to morning to take classes 3-4 times a year and start learning other aspects of what could be done in flameworking. And yeah, next thing you know, it's 22 years later, and you're completely consumed by the torch, and can't imagine your life being any different.
Yeah, and now you're working there instead of just taking classes.
I am, yeah. I lived in Vermont from beginning of 93 till 2001, and I would come out to Corning between 98 and 01 to take classes maybe 3-4 times a year. And I came out to TA for Sue Ellen Fowler in the winter of '01, and the studio was expanding, and I had friends who had been starting to move out of Vermont for potential career options. I happened to mention to one of the techs at the studio at the time that I would almost consider doing the same thing. And next thing I knew, Amy Schwartz, the director of the studio, was coming into the classroom and calling me aside and asking if I'd be interested in a job opportunity that was about to pop up there. And yeah, so I've been with the museum since 2001, minus a little stretch of time where I worked down your way at Disney for a few months.
Yeah. I'm not gonna. Well, I guess that we can talk about it. So, I guess actually to back up before I get too far ahead. So early on, when you were learning how to do this on your own in a sense, did you stay in the pipe field, or did you really just kind of start exploring other areas of the medium and manipulating the glass?
No, I got started in the pipe scene. My first 5 years was completely contingent on pipe making. I experimented with a lot of stuff. The first formal class I took out here in Corning was with Roger Paramore.
Okay.
And he really opened my eyes to other possibilities with the process. So as I started to see some other possibilities, I started experimenting with them, but I still was completely dependent on the income from the pipe thing to pay for classes or to pay for practicing the goblets that would eventually become sort of my signature thing. So yeah, the pipes paid for my education essentially.
Yeah, and I find that to be really cool because for myself it was the same way. And even though I'm Steven today still doing pipes here and there, but not like I did. But it really was the thing that the bread and butter stuff that allowed me then to play on the side. I never took a formal class until actually like 4 years ago now. I guess it's been maybe 3 years ago.
Yeah.
But I like that you're saying that because I think it's so important, especially nowadays with the opportunities to take classes in schools and formal education and this medium that wasn't available even 10 years ago. To if you are a pipe maker, to understand that the pipe isn't the only way to go to make a living. And
absolutely.
I know myself, and I'm sure you're the same way. I mean, I'm a piper at heart, but I'm also an artist in my soul, and to have this ability to learn this medium by making pipes and making a living, and then going on from there, it's a pretty cool transition.
When I moved to Corning and took the job here, I made a conscious decision not to make pipes anymore, and I haven't since then. There are so many other things that I have in my mind that I want to make that I don't even have the time to make.
Yeah.
That it's sort of been an easy thing. I haven't really been tempted. I have too many other things on my mind. If by chance the right object popped into my head, I wouldn't be shy about making it, but it just hasn't happened and hasn't been much of a focus. So I'm more focused on other things I can make. So I'm glad I got opened up to other possibilities.
Yeah, man, because it's like we said before we recorded, it's the sky's the limit anymore nowadays with glass. It's just so crazy. There's not enough time in our lifetime.
Yeah, and being here at Corning, I get exposed to so much, much beyond just the flameworking scene, the furnace scene, casting, cold working possibilities. It's hard to just settle on one type of object. There's too much out there to be tried, and I don't know. I just see too many possibilities around here all the time to settle on one sort of object to make. So I need to keep experimenting, see what I can do.
Heck yeah! So after the Paramore class, that really kind of led you into your goblet making. Yeah,
he opened my mind to other possibilities. I learned a few new things to practice. After Paramore's class, I think it was about 6 months, and I took a class with Robert Mickelson, which really continued to open up my mind. Mickelson sort of introduced a lot of sculptural possibilities that I hadn't quite thought about too thoroughly to that point. After Mickelson's class, a few months later, I took, I want to say, Emilio Santini's class. I then took a class with Sue Ellen Fowler. And then the class that really made the biggest difference for me and probably pushed me the hardest in the direction of the goblet thing was finally taking a class with Cesare Toffolo. He's been a huge mentor and influence for me, and once he sort of taught me as the gravity of the glass culture and what might be possible with the material, that sort of turned my head, and the respect for the goblet form sort of took over. So so I've been sort of hopelessly obsessed with the pursuit of perfection that is goblet making. It gets really addictive. So,
yeah, I can imagine so, man, because I know, like, myself growing up in this field, and you know, like, when the flow was coming out and showing, you know, having these covers of the masters on there and the goblet, you know, and Tough Low as well, and the, you know, all these just crazy stuff. You know, and Steve Seislow was around at the time doing goblets, and there was a small movement, it seemed like, at that time, you know, late 90s, early 2000s, of goblet makers, including yourself. And you know, I never got into the goblet, but I've always had such a fascination and appreciation for the style, especially when you get into more of like the Venetian style, you know, really intricate stems. And I mean, you know, a cup and feet are cup and feet. I mean, don't get me wrong. That, you know, it's not just you blink your eye and you got to make 1,000 of them to get one down. You know, but
this is true.
You know, but the stem to me is the signature of the artist in a sense, and it's, you know, it's even a lip wrap. You know, it's like early on, like, how the fuck are these guys doing these little tiny thin lip wraps? And then I mean,
they force you to try to control the material on a different level. I feel like. Trying to do the Venetian style goblet thing, you're trying to work thin, you're trying to work with very delicate detail, so it really sort of tunes you in to how far you can push the material in those ways, how thin you can get away with working it, how you can make structurally sound connections with very fine sculptural details, but still have them be you know, structurally sound. So it really sort of helps you to explore the outer limits of what you can do with the material. I think that's been a big part of my obsession, just seeing how thin I can work things and still control my forms, still control all my connections, but sort of live on the edge of how fragile you can get, yet still be structurally sound.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I know, like, listening to other talks and people talking about the American glass artists per se, and those that were influenced by the Venetians, I guess mainly in the furnace in a sense, but still, like, I've always heard like the chunky Venetian reference to like the American glassblower that does like the Venetian shape, but they're like super thick, you know, but they're super intricate, but they're not like that super dainty thin that the traditional Venetian style is. I mean, I'm blown away by, you know, you almost have like no wall in your glass. It's just so thin.
That's part of what I really enjoy. The wine glasses I use at home were made by a friend of mine, Dan Myrer. He's a furnace worker and mold blows his cups and then fire pops them, scores and cracks them, and gives a fire polish. And the thinness of the whole cup, and then how perfect the flame cut edge on the lip is, really makes them a perfect glass for drinking from. I tend not to even use my cups for drinking because I prefer the lips on his so much more.
Interesting.
Yeah,
I know what you mean, though. It makes a difference because I've had glasses that had like a beaded edge to them, and they just were not comfortable.
Yeah, it makes a huge difference. A few years ago was on a cruise ship and did a Riedel wine glass workshop where they, at the wine bar on this ship, they set out a few different glasses for you to try with a few different wines, and they impress upon you how important the cut of the lip and all the different shaping of each individual cup is, how essential that is to the flavor of what you're consuming and to the bouquet that you sense from inhaling. And it really made an impression on me that getting the right shape and the right lip is absolutely essential to a functional drinking glass. So there's a lot to it, and a lot of subtle refinements that can make a huge difference too.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I've been in the same situation with the wine tasting, but also a beer tasting, and it was the same way. You know, like all these different types of glasses that you get to have based on the style of beer that you're drinking, even. You know, which to me opens up another possibility for things for artists to make. You know, like talking to Eli Mazet, and he's doing the shot glass thing right now, and you know, and it's like it's just one more item that I just never really thought about. Like I know like when the whole Operation Pipe Dreams thing went down and we all were like looking for things to make that weren't pipes, and we start cranking out dildos and shot glasses and stuff, and whatever we could. But the shot glass at that time didn't really register to me like it does now, even after talking to Eli about stuff. And again, it's just one more thing in your tool bag that there's no reason you shouldn't be making these things, and it's something that you can also make to learn this medium even more so.
Yeah, glass has so many possibilities to it. I do find it a little bit frustrating with the pipe scene that people get completely blinded by the pipe scene and struggle to see beyond it.
Yeah.
There certainly are a lot of folks in that scene who are seeing well beyond it, and those tend to be some of the leaders in that scene. But glass has so many possibilities, and we are seeing that more and more right now with so much technology that incorporates glass, whether it's in the medical field or technology or this iPad that I'm looking at talking to you.
Exactly.
And it all has very unique applications of glass, and there's so much potential out there. And we really are living in the age of glass right now. Mm-hmm. So I'd love to see some broader thinking as to what Flameworkers can do. It's been exciting to see Flameworkers combining processes lately. We see a lot more folks who are bringing crucible furnaces into their practice. A lot of folks who are doing cold working and then reassembling parts. So it's interesting. It seems that people who are seeing beyond just the basic pipe in the flameworking scene are accelerating by leaps and bounds, because there's so much information out there. There's appreciation for the material out there, and now it's just a matter of putting it all together. So there's a huge amount of potential.
I think that right there is what separates the craft person from the artist in the pipe community. You know what I mean? Because it seems like and I don't want to stereotype, but there are, I think the majority of pipe makers in our community are just pipe makers, and that's what they want to be. It's like guys that just skateboard, like that's their voices and their pipes. And then there's like the skateboarders that go on and end up doing wakeboarding and snowboarding, and next thing you know they're in the Olympics, kind of thing. So it's like I see like you're talking about like the Joe P's and those kind of guys out there that are in the pipe world that are pushing the boundaries. Banjo is another guy, Buck. There's these names out there that are taking. I mean, Jason Lee too. I bring him up all the time with his Millie work. Like there's a lot of guys that are recognizing the old 200, 300, 400-year-old tradition of this medium that are taking those techniques and kind of redoing them a little bit to a modern flair with what we're doing now.
Well, absolutely, and that's sort of the history of art in general, is kind of understanding what's happened before, getting a sense as to what could be done in the future, and really digging in and making it your own, and sort of transforming the old, injecting it with new blood, new life, and making it your own, and making it the future. So there's a lot of potential for the innovators out there.
Yeah.
And we're really just barely scratching the surface of what's possible. There are certainly plenty of times that I see we bring guest artists in here at the museum who are maybe using some sort of an application at the furnace that I could envision being flameworked. And and nobody's touching these techniques just yet. So there's a ton of possibility just in seeing what's being done in some other processes and adapting them to our flameworking.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of potential, and people are just barely scratching the surface. And now that the pipe market is so huge and people can actually support themselves through it, there's room to experiment, and people can afford to push the boundaries. So it's a really special time for glass and for flameworking right now.
Yeah, man, and I think too, for our generation that has been doing this for almost 2 decades, I think we have such a huge opportunity right now, not only on the educational side of things and mentoring, but also because we understand this medium that we've been working with for almost 20 years, to do whatever the hell we want to do with it, in a sense, or have the opportunity to experiment. Like right now I'm doing furnace work over at Disney, doing both torch and furnace work. And there's so many times where like I just want to use the marver table like as if I'm using a graphite marver on the torch, or whatever. You know what I mean? Like there's so many different things, and I had the guys there showing me how to make a vase, and I'm like, well, here's how I'd make a vase. Or like we have Sky Fahey McDonough. I don't know if you know Sky or not, but
I do.
She's phenomenal, just in general. But it got to be Valentine's Day, a little bit beforehand, and I was like, I want to make some hearts in the hot shop. And she's like, well, show me how you make a heart. And I've made thousands of hearts on a torch, but never once made one in the furnace. And I nailed it my first time, and she watched me do it, and she's like, oh, I never thought about doing it that way. And it was cool to hear her saying that. Like, she has her degree in glass, in a sense, and been doing it for 20 plus years. So it's fun to be able to cross over into the furnace, taking my hand skills from the torch, and then vice versa, But it took me a while too to go. Like I would say, do 3 days in the hot shop and 2 days on the torch, and that the third day from the hot shop to the first day on the torch, that transition for about a month took me a while to get my brain wrapped around what I was doing.
Oh, sure.
You know what I mean?
You have to really process what the material's doing.
Yeah.
In my responsibilities here at the museum, there are times that I work with different artists or different people in technological fields. And I might work with 4 or 5 different compositions of glass in an afternoon. And it really forces you to think about what the material is, what that particular version of glass needs, and how to get the most out of it. It forces you to really think about the effects that the gravity's having on what you're doing. You have to think about how that particular glass does or does not get soft, how long it stays soft for, and it really sort of forces you to process every move you're making. You work hard as a glassmaker to get to the point where everything becomes intuitive, and then you start working with different glasses, and you need it to not be intuitive.
Yeah, exactly.
You need to really process all those little subtleties that you generally don't think about. All of a sudden you have to rethink them again, and it really forces you to understand the material on a whole new level.
Yeah,
I would definitely suggest to anybody and everybody out there in the glass world to play with different compositions of glass, and it will really enhance your understanding of the material. It will enhance your feel for the material, and when you switch back to a glass that you are particularly comfortable with, you'll understand that all that much better. So it's been huge for me I started in boro, then I learned a little bit of soda lime at the furnace, then I learned some soda lime on the torch, and since then I worked fused silica or quartz or barium tubing for neon. It doesn't really matter. Once you sort of learn how to feel out the material and learn how it takes in heat, what you can and can't do with a specific glass, it really reinforces your ability to work with every glass out there. So there's a lot to be learned, and a lot to sort of learn from the material itself.
Yeah, it's amazing. I was just kind of thinking back to playing with glass, and I have a lot of guests that come in and talk about the campfire and a beer bottle, melting them in the fire. Yeah. And just how they're blown away by the temperatures of the furnaces that we're working out of. And they always ask me about the beer bottle, and why it does what it does, and it's always an interesting conversation. But it also tells me how fascinated people are with just the medium itself. It's just for centuries and centuries, people have been fascinated with glass, whether they want to work with it or not. It's and fire on top of it. It's just like this.
Oh, this is definitely true. I mean, we see that all the time with our demonstrations at the museum here. That as soon as we turn on the flame, we've got their attention, and it almost doesn't matter what you make.
No, it doesn't.
As long as the fire is burning and the glass is moving in a compelling way, which it pretty much always is. You don't even really need to finish an object. You can entertain a crowd with molten glass just by sort of moving it around and explaining how and why it's moving the way it does. It's a pretty mysterious thing, and there are plenty of times where I've been demonstrating for 20 minutes, fully explained every step of what I've done. I step out of the booth, and people are still mesmerized, despite the fact that I've been explaining the whole way through. So it's it's definitely an intriguing material, and people are fascinated by it. So and as I'm sure you know, it has yet to get old for me, and I'm sure it has yet to get old for you as well.
Oh man, I love it. You know, it's just being an educator. My family, I have kind of a lineage of educators in my family too. So it's definitely, you know, in my heart and soul to teach and just to watch people just gravitate towards it. You know, but even like when I first started, I was at the Renaissance Festival. And the guy that taught me initially, he was a 35-year sculptor. Even at that time, now he's been 50 years. He's been behind the torch, but you know, he was making these big giant dragons, and that's what attracted me to him. And when I was working for him, finally, he's still doing the same shit. And here I am pulling points all day, and I had like 50 people standing in a circle around me watching me pull points, and nobody was watching him make these dragons. But it was just the flame and just the stretching of the glass, and just draws people in. It's such a simple thing, but it's so funny.
Yeah, and I personally, I have gotten to the point where I love pulling points.
I do, me too.
I see a lot of conversations out there of people who don't like to bother pulling points or don't use points. Which I think there's a time for points. There's a time to add a blow to. But as far as just the meditation of pulling points, I love it. I really enjoy starting my day by pulling a bunch of points and sort of prepping work for the rest of the day. It just sets such a meditative tone for the rest of the day. I enjoy that.
I completely agree.
So that first opportunity to really tune in with the material for the day.
Yeah,
it's a fun thing.
Yeah, I mean, it gets you fully warmed up, your hands, your brain. I mean, you're physically warmed up. You know, you get your kiln hot. It's a good way to, you know, make your time count instead of just kind of hanging out. I mean, sure, get your social media shit done too, but you know, it's like take advantage of it. Do some prep work.
Yeah, absolutely. Get on the flow of the material, and you're ready to flow with it for the rest of the day. So, not a bad way to go.
So early on in your days at Corning, so I guess to back up, did you when you were with Disney, did you work for Arribas?
I did, yeah.
And that was before Corning?
I started with the museum in 2001.
Okay.
And worked initially in our Make Your Own Glass workshop. And so I worked with the public a lot, making items in little 40-minute class sessions. And in addition to that, I was the resident flameworker, so I would do some flameworking teaching, and I had good access to practice my flameworking and make my work there. And in about end of 2006, beginning of 2007, I'd sort of hit the ceiling for growth that the studio had for me at that point, and was looking for something different, and got connected with Arribas Brothers, and the Disney thing sounded like a good move for me. So I moved down there to Orlando, and that worked really well for a while. And then I got a message from another department at the museum that they had a job posting that really sort of suited who I was and really suited my skill set. And so I applied for that. So I worked at Disney from July of 2007 until the spring of 2008, and moved back to Corning in April of 2008. And so now the job I have is running flameworking and also a couple of science-focused demonstrations that we do for the public here. Nice. So in addition to doing demos, I work with our marketing team, go out to a lot of community events to try to stir up interest to get groups to come to the museum. I do a lot of TV spots where I might be on a live TV station answering questions and making a piece of glass all at the same time. But the bulk of my responsibilities are to run a team of demonstrators here at the museum.
Heck yeah. When you guys are demonstrating, are you guys doing things that you then sell in like the retail store kind of deal, or?
We actually never sell demonstration pieces. Huh. The museum is not for profit,
right.
So we really can't.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And also, we if you're trying to sell what you're demonstrating, you can't do both 100%.
Yeah, I can see that.
Sort of my take. It's hard to do a 100% demonstration when your mind is on selling the object that you're demonstrating, because you need to focus a little more on the object than on the demo. Or if you're completely focused on the demo, then the object just rarely comes out first quality. So it's hard to do both 100%. And we're an educational institution, so what really matters to us is that we get the lesson across.
Yeah, I mean,
We
that registers so well. I mean, it makes complete sense. Yeah.
Yeah, and we ultimately end up giving away everything that we make. We
Huh.
find creative ways to give things away, which works as great marketing also.
Yeah.
So we get a ton of word of mouth marketing out of things that way.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, and I say it makes sense to me too, because like when I'm doing the torch stuff, like we do have conversations with guests. They ask questions, etc. But like in the hot shop, it's a full on verbalized demonstration, and
Yeah.
we can get custom orders in, but we limit our custom stuff to what we're already knowledgeable of making, so it's not like we're making art, quote unquote. You know what I mean? Because there are times where we are and they're kind of fucking off and having like a team build or something like that, where we're not. We let the guests know, hey, we're not really going to be talking about what's going on, but if you have any questions, let us know. Kind of thing, because you got to have that focus and get that energy flow going.
Exactly.
But do you guys ever have like a full on art show per se, or that's not a verbalized demonstration necessarily?
We do a program in most of the mornings in the off season here. In the hot shop, where our hot glass teams, we call it Gaffer's Choice. So from about 9 to noon, they're just sort of making what they're interested in.
Huh.
They'll do a little bit of narrating because the public is welcome to watch. We don't want to completely leave them in the dark. So we'll give them some information. We'll answer whatever questions they have. But for the most part, we're focused on just making some glass and not necessarily talking about it so much. So we do some things where we're mostly focused on the art as opposed to just the education end of it. We also do a lot of programs where we bring in visiting artists. So we might bring in other established artists to work in our facilities, and they are 100% focused on making artwork. We might narrate around that to make it a little more audience friendly, but still the artist is very much focused on making finished work. So we do some programs like that, but it's typically not our artists on staff who are focused on making the artwork.
Yeah, that makes sense.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I know, like, I've seen other demonstrations at other facilities. Tacoma, for instance, will have, a big name come in and they do have someone narrating, but it's a full-on, chaotic scene going, that whole chaos going on, which I love. Mm-hmm. But
and we do some similar things with visiting artists, but typically not with our own in-house artists.
Right.
Yeah.
So having all that access to, literally centuries of information. Like, do you go in there and just sit and read and study and have use those for references for yourself?
I do. Over the last few years in particular, I've been completely sucked into the rabbit hole of the history of lamp working.
God, I could imagine.
And I was kind of warned by Bill Gudenrath, who is our museum historian, that be careful when you start digging into this stuff, because you will just get endlessly sucked in. And a couple of years ago, we did our major exhibition for the year was on the invertebrate sea forms of the Blashkas.
Okay.
Which some folks know the Blashkas work. They did all the glass flowers at the Natural History Museum at Harvard University. So they were a father-son team who were, they moved from Bohemia to Germany when the son was just about school age, and made thousands of biological models for museums, for universities, basically for biological study before there were really good natural history museums. And so that got me going down the rabbit hole of what were people flameworking in the late 19th century. It got me looking into what was going on before these guys were making their body of work. And all of a sudden you start to find these interesting little pockets of history where people were flameworking and were making some amazing work. And one thing I discovered in relation to the Blashkas and this is spending tons of time in our library here at the museum, which is the biggest resource on the planet for glass information.
Yeah.
So I started researching, looking into the area where the Blaszkas came from, which was northern Bohemia. And there were, right around the time when their work was taking off, there were about 1,900 flameworkers in this small, about a 10-mile radius area of northern Bohemia. Yeah, and this is the 1860s that I managed to get some census numbers. And I'd be curious to see how that compares to Eugene nowadays, or to the Denver area nowadays. We tend to think of this pipe movement sort of in its own vacuum, like nothing else has ever happened similarly around the world.
Yeah.
But there have been some major movements of lamp working through history. And now as I continue to learn about little bits and pieces of them, I'm totally obsessed, and I need to know everything.
I want you to keep talking about it now.
So in addition to learning more about the Blaszkas, I've been fortunate to travel a bit for the museum. I made it over to Lauscha, Germany a few years ago, and Lauscha has a lampworking history that stretches back a few hundred years. So yeah, there's a lot out there. People have been lampworking in all sorts of different ways for centuries, if not even a couple thousand years. So it's interesting. When the Torch Talk guys were here a few weeks ago, I took everybody on a tour of our collections with a focus on flameworking. And I start that tour right at our very first objects. There are some beads that we have and a pendant that are from somewhere between 300 to 500 BC, and they show signs of flameworking. They show different details that could only have been made by using a small flame, and it's amazing. Most people may not have considered that flameworking back then, but before we really considered flameworking or furnace working, it was just get a piece of glass made, however you can make it.
Right.
So we've got the suspicion is there were old furnaces that were able to close them up with a few doors and force a little flame out of one little corner of a furnace, and you could melt glass over that little tiny flame. So even a couple thousand years ago, people were using processes very similar to what we do today, and we consider it flame working now. But back then, it was just doing what you got to do to make a piece of glass.
You know, I find it so funny and interesting, like some of the stuff, even going back to the days of the Egyptians, the stuff that they were doing. You know, they say, like, if we tried to recreate that, like, we couldn't because our technology isn't available. But they didn't really have, it makes you wonder what the hell kind of technology that they had. Because like I saw a special on King Tut's tomb, and they're like a recent one, and they're even saying that they think that his his coffin that he was in wasn't actually his, that it was actually recycled because of how fast he died off, and it doesn't like fit. I guess they were like like the nesting dolls, basically how they worked, and one of them didn't fit right or something. But they had all these little small other. They were basically like his people, his entourage, but they were in these little small castings. And to me, as I'm watching this, I'm thinking about the glass now, or even then potentially, using cobalt or obsidian or different things like that they had access to. And like you're saying, they had to use some kind of forging metal heat source, something to create what they created. And whether it's a mold or whatever, they use the sand for sand molds. I mean, who knows? But it's just always that kind of history, and especially when it comes down to glass, it's just, even since I was a child, I've just been so fascinated by it. I never thought I would have a medium that I would be using for a career, but it's always been fascinating since I was, going back to the beer bottle and the frickin' campfire thing.
Oh sure. And it's the whole history is shrouded in mystery too. Yeah. People when they come to the museum here, they want the answer. They want to know who invented glass, how'd they do it, when they do it, where was it, and we don't know. Nobody knows. Yeah. And that's part of the fun of this material. There's still so much mystery, and the more we learn, the more questions there are. And scientists still haven't confirmed what sort of state of matter they even think glass is. There's still the argument of if it's a liquid or a solid or amorphic solid or a frozen or super cooled liquid, and you hear arguments back and forth constantly.
Yeah.
And it's just a material that is so shrouded in mystery, even amongst those of us who know it pretty well. It's interesting stuff, and I find that the greater the expert I speak with, the more guarded they are in their answers. It seems like the more you understand about glass, the more you realize there is that you don't know.
Right.
And the more conservative you become and what questions you're willing to answer, because you know there's still some mystery out there.
Yeah, it's funny you said, because I'm like that at work. People ask me certain questions, and I'm like, I think I know, but I don't want to give you the wrong answer, kind of thing. Because I get asked all the time. I hear like the parents talking about when I'm working, how they melted down some sand and blah, 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 blah. And I'll hear that and I'll correct them just because, to give them a little bit of background on what we're doing. But then there's some things that come up and I'm just like, I don't want to give you the wrong information. But you can go to Corning's website and they'll got the...
I mean, we have the same reservations here. We know when we answer a question, somebody is considering that to be the gospel.
Yeah.
So we take our answers very seriously. And there are plenty of times where I will take somebody's contact information because I can't answer their question on the spot. I need to refer to our curators or our chief scientists or whomever the real experts may be before I give an answer, because if I put an answer out there, people consider it to be the word that the Corning Museum of Glass is putting out, and I always need to consider that.
Well, that's why I appreciate that you're part of the Torch Talk group, just because of you do have that knowledge and the access, and you can go on there and correct the occasional troll that comes up and talks some shit or says something that's completely out of left field that's wrong.
And I try to be reasonable, but if there's something that I am 100% confident on and I see incorrect info, I'm going to jump on it. Or a lot of times I just like to point out where people can find the information.
Yeah, exactly.
I think a lot of what we see on Torch Talk are a lot of folks who don't realize what information is out there and is published and is verifiable. And a big part of my mission is just to let people know it is out there.
Yeah.
And, people have studied this, and there are answers. There are many questions we don't yet have answers to, but there are some pretty good answers that have been well researched for a couple centuries, and people just need to know where to find those answers.
Well, I know, like talking to Bandhu when he was doing his research for his books, he said the same thing. Like, there's so much information. I mean, he could write 6 novels, of all of his books because of how much freaking information is out there. I mean, just in lamp working alone, so I guess my main question for that being said, like with Corning's online resources, like are they beginning to build an online like resource kind of space?
Absolutely. You can always send questions to our librarians at Rakow at cmog.org. So Rakow is RAKOW at cmog.org. People can go to our website, and there's an Ask a Librarian page to ask questions. And our library staff is incredible. If they don't know the answer, if they don't know the exact resource to find it in, they will track it down. And we have a lot of information that has been digitized already. We also have a lot of resources that we can share through interlibrary loans. We have videos that are online. We have a huge YouTube presence as well. So, we put a ton of our information online, and we just keep adding to it all the time. So there's a ton out there. Yep.
Are you guys doing like live streaming demos and that kind of stuff on YouTube?
Yes. Yeah, we do live streams when we have instructors at our studio. We do live streams of visiting artists in our demonstration spaces. We do live streams of some of the parties that we do monthly. So check out our YouTube channel. It has a ton of good stuff out there. And also, I've been doing a blog series around some of the travels I've done over the last few years, and I'm about to do some pretty cool travels again this year.
Nice.
So yeah, so those blog posts go up on our CMOG blog site. If you look up Glass Pilgrim, you'll find a bunch of my travel information. So I did just some written posts about things when I went to Lauscha in the Czech Republic in 2013. And then in 2014, I went to Murano for a week and a half and shot a bunch of video there. So you'll find a bunch of interesting video resources that I shot and uploaded. So we have a ton of stuff on our website to connect to.
You gonna go out to the gas conference this year?
I am, yes. Very excited for that, and I'm gonna go to Europe about a week and a half before the conference. Go back to the Czech Republic to visit a few different places, and back to Lauscha for a few days also.
Nice. So when you're doing these travels, are you like doing it as like personal research for yourself, or are you doing it research for Corning?
It is sort of training for myself. That's sort of how these travels started. So the more that I can learn from primary sources by actually going to towns and talking with people, the more I can bring back and share at the museum. So I've been able to take these trips really as sort of training for myself to learn something culturally, technically, historically. But I also, since I love to share information, I started writing about the travels I was doing, and then the writing was pretty popular, so I brought a camera to Murano. And so it's sort of a combination of collecting information for the museum, collecting information for myself, so my understanding is broader, and so I can share that information with our staff here and also with our guests here.
Too cool, man. What an awesome opportunity.
It's amazing. I definitely do not take it for granted, and that's another reason why I like to share all the information that I'm able to collect. I know I have a special opportunity, and I feel obligated to share it as best I can. So,
heck yeah. So
nice to be able to put it out there.
Yeah, man, it's such an incredible. I know I'm appreciative of it myself, and I know that those out there that follow you or follow Corning or just Glass in general, I definitely know they appreciate it too, because it's not easy. It's not easy work. All the traveling and all that stuff.
No, it's exciting, it's fun, but it wears you out.
Yeah, it's a pain in the ass.
It does. It's my last trip to Murano. We were doing 14 to 16-hour days each day, and you're just on the move. When a door opens and somebody says they'll talk to you, you go, you set up the camera, and you talk.
Yeah.
And whenever those doors open, you go and you grab what you can when you can get it. So
I'm pretty pumped too. Like I really would love to go out to Italy for this gas conference. I mean, it'd be incredible. Just know with my scheduling and money and blah blah blah, it's not happening. But
it's not an easy one.
No, but this next one is in St. Pete, which is my hometown, and
nice.
Yeah, bro, I'm super excited about it because, like, for the years and years and years of growing up there, and there was myself, and there was maybe like 3 other of us that were lamp workers, that were pipe makers, and then it was a bunch of furnace guys. And for the longest time, like, I'd go to all the art shows, I'd introduce myself to all the artists, and I'd always get the kind of the stigma of, oh, I'm a pipe maker, even though I never said I made pipes. They just assumed it,
Yeah.
And then then the Chihuly Cross Florida thing happened, and then he took wind of St. Pete, and then his collection came and opened up, which I ran that and opened up that collection for about 3 years and did tours and educational stuff through that.
Nice.
I had no hot shop experience, but I learned so much. I mean, I probably know more about Chihuly now than he knows about himself, kind of stuff. But but for the longest time, I kept saying, like, St. Pete is going to be the next mecca for glass. It's like there's Italy, and then there's Seattle, and then there's little St. Pete. And sure as shit, here we are now, over almost 20 years later, we got the freaking gas conference coming to St. Pete. And 2 really good friends of mine, Josh and Dave, who have Zen Glass, they're going to be part of one of the guys, places that are hosting it. And it's like... It's it's so cool just to grow up in this industry and in this medium, and just to be a part of it and the part of this journey, and have friends and getting to meet people like yourself, that are just that are growing up. I mean, literally, how old are you?
I'm 45.
Okay, yes, I'm 41. Yep. So I mean, literally, we've all like grown up in this medium. We've all become men in a sense with this really frustrating medium that we deal with. People are like, you got all the patience in the world. I'm like, yeah, after 20 years of this shit and having 2 kids, it'll definitely make you have some patience.
Yeah, no kidding.
God almighty.
Yeah.
I know myself personally, I always preach about how glass is such like life, if you're not on center, etc., it's like life is exactly the same way. And it's a cool correlation, but again, growing up in this medium and having this intimate understanding, it's just, I don't know, it's a unique experience that only certain of us get to experience. Sure, there's thousands of glass artists out there, but compared to the population of the earth, there's still a small percentage of us on this earth that get to experience this crazy obsession of glass like we do.
This is true, and it seems to draw a sort of unique, adventurous souls as well. It seems like a lot of the folks in the glass world can interrelate really well because we have some similar sort of spiritual sense or some sense of adventure in life that kind of brings us together. The glass thing is such a torturous material. It challenges you in so many ways, and it seems like only folks who can handle such challenges stick with it.
Yeah.
And that sort of perpetuates this group of adventurous souls to continue on with it. So it seems like the glass community is filled with these interesting, adventurous souls who can all relate to one another. It's a unique community.
Yeah, it sure is. And I always kind of laugh about the fact that a lot of us are introverted. Like I'm a little bit of both. It depends on the situation. But you get a bunch of glassblowers together and watch the hell out because it's going to be a crazy time.
Yeah, I would say that I qualify as sort of an outgoing introvert, and that fits, I think, with a lot of glass makers, particularly flameworkers, because we're all so used to hiding out in a garage or a basement or whatever and just sort of cranking away on our own.
Yeah.
And it seems to work pretty well for the more introverted artistic types.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I know what you mean with the outgoing, because I'm the same way. Like, I have to have my fix of people and being out there and talking to folks and, changing lives in a sense by this awesome medium and then that we're sharing. Because I'm sure you hear the same thing as like, oh, I'd love to do that. It's like, well, if you don't mind cutting and burning yourself every day, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's got its challenges, and if I'm doing it right, then you probably don't see what those challenges are as the layperson. So
yeah, exactly.
That's another part of what we try to dispel here at the museum. People tend to see us just breeze through demonstrations, and we make it look easy. Mm-hmm. And if we didn't, you probably wouldn't trust us to demonstrate in front of you.
Right.
But just the same, how do you show people what's possible, yet still give them a sense of how difficult it actually is? Mm-hmm. So, yeah, there are times we lose things even in a demo. So
yeah,
sometimes that's the most valuable message.
Oh, I completely agree, man. Like, I hate when I'm on stage and something goes wrong because I feel like an amateur. But at the same time, I'm glad it happens because I get a chance to understand what frustrations we go to, but also why the shit's priced at what it's priced at, at the same time, But like my first class I ever took was with Steve Seislove, and it was him and Coyle, and Steve was working on this really amazing Venetian style female figure with his bubble trap technique, and about halfway through the thing cracked and fell apart, and they were in the studio space, so we had microphones to talk back and forth. And I said on the mic, I'm like, I am so glad that just happened, just because we all get a chance to see that even guys like Steve Seislove have shit that goes wrong. And he's like, dude, everybody has shit that goes wrong.
Absolutely. I think one of the better lessons I learned early on in my glass career, I think I was maybe 4 years into flameworking, and I was here in Corning. I'd come out to take a class. I think I was taking Mickelson's class, and Jim Novak was teaching out in the hot shop. He's a Seattle glass blower. Mm-hmm. And everybody's watching Jim. He's working on this big, amazing female torso with hours and hours worth of cane in it. And he's just about done, and all of a sudden it falls off the punty and hits the floor. And everyone in the building is freaking out except for Jim. Jim just quietly grabs his assistant, has his assistant heat up the punty again. He goes over, grabs some gloves, warms up the gloves. His assistant gets the punty warm. He picks up the sculpture off the ground, heaves it back onto the punty, and of course it wasn't first quality, but he did manage to finish the piece. And I asked him about that later. Like, you were the only one in the building who wasn't freaking out when that happened. And he just pointed out to me that if he did freak out, it was all over with. Yep. So one thing you got to learn when things do go wrong, you can't afford to get all caught up in it. You have to relax. You have to just settle yourself down, take a breath, think about what the material needs to be able to recover from whatever mistake just happened, and then provide the object with what it needs, and try to sensibly move your way through it. And that was such a huge lesson for me. Just, if something goes wrong, first thing you need to do is relax and take a breath. And it's amazing how quickly you can recover once you get your head on straight again and think about what the material needs. And you can sort through it pretty quickly. Yeah,
it's such a good point. Because even like, early on with these ornaments I'm making, I get asked a lot if I've ever had anything, everybody's afraid it's going to fall off the blowpipe, because of the way the glass moves. Yeah. And early on, I'm doing my jack line or whatever, and I'm squeezing too tight and just pop the fucking ornament right off the end of my blowpipe, and it's like rolling around the floor, and I get asked about that all the time. And, and a couple times I go to try to stop it with my shoe, and I got to remember that I can't stop it with my shoes because this shit's still 1,000 degrees, as it's rolling across the floor. But it's the same thing. Like, you got to just take a deep breath. You got to calm down, get your wits together. But you have to do that all within like 5 seconds.
True.
You know what I mean?
It needs to happen quickly, but you can't. You got to get yourself thinking straight, and then you have a chance to recover. Yeah,
because I think the recovery, in a sense, sometimes is way more rewarding than just going through the process and finishing a piece. If you can fuck up and then fix it and then have a final piece, it's pretty fulfilling.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah, if you can win those little battles, it's nice.
Yeah, man, because glass is always winning.
Yep. That is true.
So funny. I don't know if you can talk about it. I was want to ask you, too, about the cruise ships and the demonstrations you guys used to do.
Yeah, the cruise ships. So we were approached almost 10 years ago by Celebrity Cruise Lines. Somebody from Celebrity was calling our offices, and before they even reached out to us, I guess the one of the high-ups, I believe the owner of Celebrity Cruise Lines, had seen glass blowing and found it really intriguing, thought it would be a really cool thing to have on the ships as entertainment for the guests. And as he poked around trying to find a glass studio that would partner with them to get on the ships, people kept saying, hey, you got to talk to Corning. They're the ones that do a lot of travel demonstration, and they're the ones that can pull that off for you. So they heard that enough times. Finally, they called us up, and apparently whoever answered their first call was like, yeah, cruise ships. You want to blow glass on cruise ships? Okay, click. And didn't answer their questions, thought whoever was calling was just sort of joking. And so this happened, I guess, a couple of times. And eventually, somebody finally did believe the call, passed it to the right set of ears. And so we had to develop glass blowing equipment that would be all electric because they didn't want any flames on the ships. And so we worked with Fred Metz from Spiral Arts out in Seattle to develop furnace equipment that was all electric and super high quality. And the way it works is we send 3 glass blowers out. They have 3 different ships that have hot glass studios built on the top deck. And we have been providing glass blowers to man the ships and provide glass blowing demonstrations. And that had gone on for the last 9 years.
Yeah, what a cool opportunity that is.
Yeah, I dabble at the furnace, and I've gone out for a couple of contracts. I went out the winter of 2009 into 2010, and then the winter of 2010 into 11. And it was a great experience. Really, really unique opportunity to see the world, to blow glass in amazing places. And the way we run our demonstrations, we don't insist that people make anything specific as long as it can make for a compelling demonstration for our audiences. So that was a great opportunity for people to explore the color palette, explore their own skills, explore the world. So it's a very unique opportunity. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I could imagine. So I mean, like rough seas and stuff, because being at the top of the ship, I mean, you're at like the top of the pendulum in a sense.
Yes.
So like, this,
it gets interesting.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Let's see, there was one day we were coming into San Juan and had 25-foot seas, and the ship couldn't enter the port area. And we had just finished making glass for the previous 2 hours, and then an announcement comes on that, sorry, folks, we can't enter the San Juan port because the seas are too high. And meanwhile, we're thinking, well, we just made glass in this. There's got to be some way we can drive the ship.
Right.
But yeah, it keeps it interesting. When you go to drop a foot onto something and you grab onto the punty, you're waiting for the hot glass to drip off of the punty onto the bottom of the piece, and all of a sudden, as the glass is dripping, you look down and the piece is like a foot further left of the gather than it was originally.
Sure. God.
So yeah, and there are times when you're making your way from the bench to the glory hole, and all of a sudden you're walking uphill to get there, or maybe you're walking back downhill to get back to the bench. So it keeps it interesting. You do have to take it into consideration. For the most part, it's pretty mellow. The ships have stabilizers; they're not too crazy, but you're on something that's moving. That's for sure.
Well, that's what I'm thinking, especially when you're up top like that, because you're really going to feel the effects. It's like being at like the back of the roller coaster kind of situation,
Yeah.
You're going to feel it.
I mean, you're certainly moving up there, and we have to be careful when we load the annealer that somebody's holding the annealer door. Otherwise, we've had issues where it'll close on somebody who's trying to load a piece in there because the ship moves. So, yeah, you learn to sort of work around the fact that your studio's moving.
Yeah, definitely an environment to adapt
used to it. Yeah.
Got to have your sea legs.
Yeah, I think one of the coolest moments I've had in my glass career was making a piece while traveling through the Messina Straits, which is the little canalway between mainland Italy and Sicily, and making a piece of glass as the sun's setting over Sicily, and just sort of forgetting that there's a piece of glass on the end of the pipe, and it's kind of dripping towards the floor as you're just looking off at a beautiful sunset over Sicily.
Yeah, I could imagine so.
Yeah, I didn't lose the piece. I got my wits back together, but it's an amazing experience when you're just sort of outdoors watching these incredible landscapes around you, and you're blowing glass at the same time.
Yeah,
it's pretty special. Well,
especially when you're going into Italy like that, like the homeland in a sense, doing it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Was the studio open or was it enclosed?
It was open. It has a roof over it, and the equipment is enclosed.
Okay.
But it opens sort of almost like an amphitheater, like an outdoor amphitheater sort of space where you've got cover over just the stage, but there's also a lawn space that is not covered. So all the equipment is covered up, and there's like a garage bay door that closes down over everything at the end of the night that you can lock up. Yeah, so it's all the equipment's well protected, but the audience is exposed to the elements.
Yeah. Because I've had a lot of guests that come in, that talk about that, but the one complaint they have is they couldn't buy the piece.
Yes,
and it made total sense when you said about the the nonprofit. I forgot about that.
Yeah, that is a consistent complaint. On the ships, though, you do get an opportunity to purchase something, because on the last day of each cruise, we would do an auction of a few pieces that had been made during the course of the cruise, and the proceeds of the auction go to our scholarship fund at our studio. So, yeah, so that money works well. It's provided a lot of education for a lot of glass blowers.
Heck yeah! Are there any big projects or shows or events coming up at Corning, like in the next couple months?
Well, we are sort of in between major exhibitions. We typically close a major exhibition in January and then open a new one either in May or June.
Okay.
And this summer we are opening a show called The Glass of the Architects, which is not quite what it sounds like. It probably sounds like it would be a bunch of architectural glass, but it's actually a show that focuses on works that were made around Vienna between 1900 to 1937. So there were some major art movements that were all sort of taking place right around then. You had the arts and crafts movement in England a little bit before that. And then around 1900, you had the Austrian secession, or the Vienna secession, with artists sort of rebelling against the old art schools and really sort of starting a new set of design aspirations in the art world. And some very famous designers came out of that time. Joseph Hoffmann, Austrian master designer. Koloman Moser is another one. So we're going to have some amazing works from around Central Europe from 1900 to 1937. So that should be a pretty exciting show here. We're getting pretty fired up for that. And we've had a cool show going on at our library for the past year, and it's going to continue into 2019. It's called Curious and Curiouser, and it focuses on materials from our library that have inspired people's work. So we have recipe books that have inspired artists to try making new colors in glass. We've got different artists who have studied some of the different materials. There's Wesley Fleming has a beautiful bee in the show and sort of talks about how he was impressed by studying the Blashkas through our library. Paul Stankard has a paperweight in there, and he pulled out some materials that really inspired some of his floral work. So it's a pretty cool show that shows how our resources have inspired artists and also inspired scientists through the years. So yeah, we have some good stuff going on. Amazing class lineup for the summer at our studio. So people should go on our website to check out the lineup of all the folks who are coming here. You mentioned Bondu earlier. He's teaching here this summer. Emilio Santini will be back again. Chris Ahalt will be here for the first time, which we're quite excited about. So Cha Glass, if people follow him.
Yeah, he's phenomenal.
And and for Chris, we're going to keep him here after his class to work as a visiting artist in front of the public for a couple of days as well. So that'll be pretty cool. I think some people may have noticed that we had Yushin here for a couple extra days after his class, or we had Salt stick around for a couple of days as a visiting artist after his class as well. So we're doing what we can to not only bring in these amazing people to teach, but also keep them around for a couple extra days so we can sort of show them off to our daily guests at the museum as well.
Heck yeah, and I love how the pipe maker, that hasn't, I mean, they have a name for themselves, obviously, but just in general, the fact that, we have pipe makers that are now coming into a place, an institution, that maybe frown upon that for a long time. I mean, I know like the gas conference, in a sense, maybe still doesn't accept it per se. There's some acceptance going on, some, old school, some new school, but I still find it very exciting to see, those that are making waves in the glass world that are pipe makers, that are phenomenally talented.
I think at this point the conversation has turned more to quality makers, and for us the concern is, are they quality makers, and if we're going to bring them in to be an instructor, are they a quality instructor? Yeah. And do they have something they can share with our student community that we encourage them to share? So that is certainly the case with a lot of folks and different facets of the glass world, different facets of the flameworking world, and we want the highest caliber makers and instructors to come here.
Yeah, man, that's amazing. I love it. Because I know there's like a lot of guys and gals out there that are amazing artists, but they can't teach for shit. So,
that's true. It's definitely true. It's being a good maker and being a good teacher are not necessarily the same thing. Yeah. In fact, they're very different things. So. Yeah, and you see a lot of artists who they do things so intuitively. They're not very good at explaining even things they do every day. So it's different skill sets. Absolutely.
Yeah, completely. Hell yeah, man. Well, I think it's a good spot for us to take a quick break now and thank our sponsors, and then we'll come back and it'll be time for us to crash the kiln.
All right.
This episode of the Wise Guy Radio Show is brought to you by the Flow magazine. Since its inception, the focus of the Flow has been to provide a bond among members of the lampworking community. In every issue, you can enjoy great content with the hottest artists and cutting-edge techniques using the latest industry products. These features, along with the continuation of our Women in Glass edition, Glasscraft Emerging Artist Awards, inspiring gallery showcases, dynamic general interest articles, as well as health and safety information, make the Flow the leading international lampworking journal. For more information or to subscribe to the Flow, go to theflowmagazine.com. That's theflowmagazine.com. The Crash in the Kiln round consists of 7 questions. You can give me a 30 to 60 second answer if you'd like, or expound upon them as everybody always does. And the first question I always like to ask is if there's any living glass artist that you haven't had a chance to work with yet, who would it be and why?
Ooh, living glass artist that I haven't had a chance to work with yet. Let's see. I mean, there are certainly tons of folks who would fit into this. I think I'm going to tie this into travels that I would like to have in the near future. I would love to get over to Japan to work with some of the artists we're seeing coming out of there nowadays. I had the chance to meet Akio and Junichi Kojima a couple of years ago when the Gas Conference was here in Corning. And I'm just blown away by the quality of what people are doing over there right now.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And so I would love to visit, get to know the culture of Flameworkers over there a bit better, and really work with some of these guys. They're taking their technical skills to just amazing levels. So that's I've been fortunate enough with a lot of my travels and connections in the glass world, whether it be here in Corning or people I've been able to visit. But Japan is definitely one that's high on my list, and there are a number of artists I'd love to catch up with over there.
Heck yeah. You know, I find that the Japanese artist, to me, seems like they're the kind of artist that really takes tradition in their culture and translates it into glass. You know.
Absolutely.
You know, it's phenomenal.
Yeah, their respect for craftsmanship and for the culture around craftsmanship, and their respect for really pursuit of perfection. I love it. Yeah. And I know a few different folks who teach over there and really prefer teaching over there because the students are just ready to learn and ready to apply what they learn. So it sounds fascinating. Yeah, absolutely. Heck yeah. What are your top 5 favorite colors in glass? Top 5 favorite colors. I have been sort of obsessing over opalines lately. Okay. So I'm running out of opaline from North Star. Been using Moonstone from Molten Aura that I love. It's incredibly stiff, but I love the effects from it. Let's see. I'm very excited by what Molten Aura just announced recently with their sandcrafted colors. Me too. I get hit with a lot of questions from people in the flameworking world who are running their own crucible furnaces and trying to get into melting color or even just remelting pre-made color. And a big part of what lots of folks were missing is just not melting from raw materials, which presents a lot of challenges to finished products. And I think it's incredibly exciting that we do now have a color company who is melting straight from sand and really melting from primary materials. It's going to open up new possibilities. Let's see. I've been loving the next-gen transparents from Alchemy lately. They're gorgeous. I love where our color companies are going. It used to be really frustrating that the color in borosilicate was so low quality compared to soda lime. So many bubbles and seeds, and largely related to the fact that people were melting from cullet and not melting at high enough temperatures. And it seems like everybody's really upped their game lately, and we're seeing much cleaner color that is a much more fair representation of what borosilicate glass can be. So it's exciting. And
Hell yeah.
I've been using amber purple in my work since day one.
Yeah, me too.
You can't resist it.
I love it.
I use a ton of the Chinese tubing in my work as well. That stuff is extremely important for me for making fine cups. So I've been thrilled to see the Chinese colored tubing palette continue to expand as well.
Yeah, me too. The new opaques they came out with are fun.
Yeah, they're tricky, but they're really nice, and yeah, that just has opened up possibilities. For me, it's tough to make really the highest quality stemware I want to make with hand pulled tubing.
Mm-hmm.
It tends not to be consistent enough to really blow fine stemware with it. So I kind of need the Chinese tubing that's machined to make the quality colored work that I want to make. So.
Speaking of the Chinese color, have you tried the new striking white yet?
I have not, but I've been hearing good things about it. I haven't gotten my own hands on it yet, though.
It's so weird.
Yeah.
I mean, like I understand striking colors, but for a white to strike, it just doesn't make any sense unless you understand the properties. Maybe you can fill me in.
I haven't explored that one enough. I have a decent understanding as to how and why we see coloring glass the way we do, but I couldn't pretend to speculate what's really going on with that white.
Yeah, it's so strange because it has the same texture as like the regular Chinese white does, and it looks like it's seedy, but it's not at all. It's just the way the color is made. I don't know. It's just so weird, but it comes out into a really nice. I mean, to me, it just turns into what the traditional China white looks like.
Yeah.
But, it's definitely different properties, though. It's definitely very strange. It almost reminds me of like steel wool, like when that was first coming out. Like that kind of weird texture, kind of off gas a little bit. It's just weird. But I love all the new colors they're coming out with, and I hate when people bitch about the China shit. I'm like, there's color made all over the world. Who cares? It's made in China.
Yeah, and if you don't realize that a lot of the raw materials and the colorants are coming from over there in the first place, then you're really not on top of your argument in the first place.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's like over patriotism towards America, which I love our country, but still, it's like, not everything has to be made in USA.
No, it's a global economy, so be smart.
Yeah, exactly.
Think about what you need for your work and acquire it.
Exactly.
Yep.
So, question 3 is, what is your worst injury in the studio?
Worst injury in the studio? Let's see. I guess the worst thing I had was actually at work when I worked at our studio here in Corning. In the make your own glass, each morning you have to come in and empty the annealer. And so I was emptying an annealer filled with furnace pieces with flowers that were sculpted at the furnace. And you have to tag all of them. There's an annealer map, so you make sure each piece gets back to the right customer. And so it's like 8 in the morning. I'm emptying the annealer. There's nobody else in the building. And I reach across a bunch of pieces to put a tag on the first one on the back of the kiln. And I slice my arm open on one of the pieces I was reaching across. And there was nobody around in the building. I eventually got to a phone and called security, but at that point was already, I had lost a fair bit of blood, wound up being okay, got about 10 stitches, and that I think was the worst injury I've had, and it wasn't even melting glass. It was glass that was cold in an annealer and just razor sharp.
Man, it's amazing how sharp that shit is.
Yeah, that stuff will get you. All you got to do is just barely glance across it.
It's incredible. It's like that's what always reminds me that it's glass is when I get cut. I can burn myself all day and it's like, oh, whatever. It's like, it's hot something. But when it cuts me, it's like, oh, yeah, this is glass.
Yep.
It's amazing.
No doubt.
So you have any glass blowing themed tattoos?
I don't have any tattoos,
okay.
So no.
Cool. When you're in the studio, well, I guess at Corning's a little different, but early on in the days of working at home, did you ever have a radio on or watch TV, or did you do both for entertainment?
I've never been able to do the TV watching thing, but I always have music, and or nowadays sometimes I'll have a podcast on, but it's always something when I'm working on my stuff.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yep.
Heck yeah.
Glass is such a rhythmic thing that to not have music going just seems out of place. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. If you could describe the sound of glass cracking in one word, whether it's like a physical sound or a whatever sound, spiritual sound or something, what would you use to describe the sound of glass cracking?
It sounds like disappointment.
Well said.
I guess.
Yep. Yeah. Hell yeah.
Disappointment or frustration, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
Rarely satisfaction, that's for sure.
I enjoy breaking glass when it's cracked, but that's the satisfying part.
Yeah.
And so, what are your top 5 favorite tools in the studio?
Top 5 favorite tools
besides your glasses and your torch and that kind of stuff.
My favorite tool is heat.
Okay.
Second favorite would be gravity.
Yeah.
Third, I guess my hands.
Okay.
Fourth, probably my small jacks. And then another set of tools that have gotten really important for me lately are my inside sculpting tools from Griffin Glass. Over the last few years, I've been doing pieces where I've been sculpting sheet glass and then applying the sheet glass to cage cups that I make. And the inside sculpting tools have been really helpful for sculpting the sheet glass. So those have been pretty handy.
Yeah, I've seen. I think it was Size Love that was using one, and it has like a small little ball on the end of it, so he was able to go up into the tubing and like push out a shoulder or something like that.
Exactly. Yeah. So I've got a set that are 4 different size balls, which are they're fashioned after the inside sculpting tools you see like Martin Yanechki or Karen Willenbrink use at the furnace. And then I had Scott make a couple other shapes, different lines, essentially. One curved line, one straight line. So basically just some different shapes on the end of a wooden handle with a long steel rod attaching to the end of the shape.
Cool. Heck yeah. You're the first person to mention those, so yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, they're pretty handy. And I stumbled into the tools and the process sort of in the right timing. So it's kind of nice when you find the right tool for a process that you're just starting to explore right as you're exploring the process.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, so that worked well.
That's a good way to start good habits right away.
Yeah.
Hell yeah, man. Well, before we let you go here, and again, I appreciate you coming on, man, and taking some time out of your day. It's
my pleasure. My pleasure.
It's been fun. I could talk with you for hours on this stuff. I mean, I could probably do a whole episode with you just talking about color and properties of glass. So, but before I let you go here, if you want to give us a little parting piece of advice, and then where we can find you out there in the world of cyberspace.
Parting piece of advice. Let's see. Never stop pushing yourself would be key advice. There's way too much yet to be explored in our glass world, and I hope people will continue to pursue and innovate and not worry so much about what other folks are making and focus on what you're making and what you can make. And let's see, where to find me. Instagram is a pretty good place. So I'm at Eric's Glass, all one word, ERICSGLASS on Instagram. So yeah, that's it. And come and visit me here at the Corning Museum of Glass too.
Heck yeah.
We love visitors, and even if you're not coming up to take classes, our library is an incredible place to spend a few days, and our collections are second to none. So hopefully we'll get some of y'all up here to visit.
Yeah, man, I gotta get my ass up there. It's on my list of places to visit.
Yeah. Yep.
For sure. Well, awesome. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode and interview with Eric Goldschmidt. You can find him again on all his social feeds out there. I'll have all the links in the show notes. And this man has a wealth of information. And if you ever get to Corning, definitely look him up. And, yeah, again, dude, I appreciate your time. And look forward to future chit chats with you and getting to meet you in person, hopefully here soon.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem, man. And don't forget, you can leave us a review on iTunes, all that good stuff. And stay tuned for after this episode. I have a little review of this conversation, kind of touching on some bullet points and stuff like we've been doing here in the new season episode, or season 4 already, which is crazy. But until next time, thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Wise Guy Radio Show. You guys take care. Peace. You know, a lot of the fun stuff I enjoy talking with artists like himself is their paths. You know, starting off with, you know, early on in his days being exposed to the pipe, learning the medium through the pipe, and then taking that knowledge and going in a whole different direction. And you know, you heard me earlier on talk about the differences in our community, and I'm not trying to stereotype anybody, but I definitely know that there is a different dynamic in what we're doing and who's doing what. You know, a lot of people an artist want to just stay in the community of being a pipe maker, and I completely respect and appreciate that. And then there's another side of the glass artist per se who wants to understand the medium and then just take the knowledge they learned making pipes and go into other areas of the glass. And it's understandably not easy to transition, especially when it comes to making a living. Fortunately for myself, I'm blessed to have a job doing what I'm doing. Eric's in the same boat, working with Corning. But there are opportunities. I mean, like you said, you know, these cruise ships have freaking glass blowing demonstrations on them. And I guess my biggest takeaway from these kind of things is it never hurts to ask and to explore and fulfill those questions that you have. Whether it's going and picking up a book or making a phone call or traveling to frickin' Europe to do research and work with other artists, you know, that kind of stuff. It's pretty it's pretty fascinating stuff. You know, this crazy medium of glass that we're all obsessed with. It's, you know, the journey it can take us on. Sometimes we have expectations, and then sometimes it takes us on to places that we never even thought it would take us. And I guess it kind of brings me to, you know, where I'm at now with myself and doing my journey with the Arribas Brothers and working over at the Mouse House and doing that. I never in a million years, for one, thought as an artist I'd be playing and working with a medium like glass. Much less working in a place in an institute that I'm at now. It's just amazing, and then a lot of the reasons that I'm in the position that I'm in is because I asked questions and I knocked on doors and explored things and did research and worked 60-hour weeks and broke a ton of shit and cut and burned myself and just stayed at it. And, you know, I'm sure you heard me early on say how my first wife was just kind of thinking this was just going to be like another thing I was going to do for a couple weeks and then go on to the next thing. And, you know, when it comes to life, that's, you know, that's what life is about. Life is about trying out new things and seeing what you like and what is fulfilling to you. And one thing you'll find will be that thing. And for those listening to the show, if you're a glass artist, you know, obviously glass is that thing. So now it's just, you know, finding the ways to make a living at it so that you can do it on a full-time basis. And there's lots of arenas and areas and things to make. Things that haven't been made yet, even, you know, especially when you go back and think about the back in time when this medium was first coming around and what people were exploring and making, and it's just so fascinating. And I'm, you know, as you can tell, I enjoy talking about glass. I could sit and talk to Eric and guys like him and girls in this community we have for hours and hours and hours about this medium. So again, my biggest takeaway from this is don't be afraid to explore and read and take time away from the torch to do research in glass. You know, it isn't all about just being on the torch or in the hot shop melting away the day. It's about other things outside of that, you know, reflecting on your day. What did you learn? Could you do something differently? Processes and technique that you've been doing 1,000 times. There's one little nuance that you can change to make that technique better. You know, those kind of little things you got to sit back and reflect. It's not about just going out there, turning your shit on, making a bunch of stuff, and then calling it a day and going and back into the house and, you know, doing whatever you're doing. you got to be able to take a day or take a couple minutes or an hour and make a journal for yourself. Write down formulas and recipes for things that you're making in glass. Really, fine tune what it is that you're doing, and before you know it, you're going to be somewhat of a master at specific techniques or a certain item. The whole master or maestro term kind of gets thrown around a lot, but there are artists out there that have been doing this for 60 plus years that still don't consider themselves to be a master or a maestro at what they're doing. It's just kind of subjective in a sense. Even though we would call a lot of those guys and gals out there masters at it because of our perspective, But that being said, I could ramble on here about this whole thing. But again, the whole thing is just explore. Don't be afraid to get off the torch and go do research on glass, why it works the way it works, what's the chemicals that go into it, all that stuff. Really know what it is that you're working with. And again, as he said before, there's still controversy and conversations going on about what glass actually is, which I find to be fucking crazy. And super fascinating. So again, thanks for tuning into this episode, number 187 of the Wise Guy Radio Show. I believe 187. I hope that's right because I cannot edit that out or redo it. But so next time we'll have a next interview coming up. I'm going to be doing a lot of business talk coming up here. It talks about my journey through glass as well. And all kind of other fun stuff in this crazy world of the glass movement. So have a great day. Happy melting. It's going to be hot out there if you're in the summer zones. If you're listening to this in the summertime, stay hydrated. Stay warm out there if it's cold. Either way, be happy, healthy, and stay wise. Love y'all. Take care. Peace.
You're listening to the Wise Guy Radio Show.